So I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the questions that we had for Socrative. Just remember to keep looking at all the different resources you have, especially the pre-work videos. They'll definitely be an explanation for more than one person, right? So you should be able to understand a little bit easier going through all that. When going through these, especially if you know you didn't get to the question, I highly recommend you to try them out first before you hear the explanation, but here we go. So student council is renting a tent for $350 for an upcoming student fair. Each student attending the fair will pay 50 cents. All other attendees will pay $2.25 each. If 200 students attend the fair, which inequality can be used to determine the number of other attendees represented by A needed to cover the cost of the tent. So to solve this, you have to understand what it is you need to find. We're told that we have $350 for this tent. And essentially, we're trying to figure out how to cover the cost of this tent for this fair. So pull out the information you know. The $0.50 represents the cost per student, right? Cost per student. And then the $2.25 represents the cost per attendee. I'm going to put A for short. Now, the other piece of information we know is that we have 200 students. So if we take all that information, first, let's compare these two, right? We know how many students are going to be at this fair, and we know how much it costs for each of them to go to the fair. So if we take 200 and we multiply it by 50 cents, this is going to tell us the total amount for students, right? The total amount we got when the students came. So if we look, the only two answer choices that match something like this are A and B. So we can cross out C and D. Now the difference between A and B is one subtracting, one's adding. This is where it makes, you have to make sure you know what's going on in the problem. We're trying to cover the cost of the tent, and how that's happening is when people are coming to this fair, they're paying an entry fee. So that means the only part we haven't talked about was this 2.25. So the 2.25A, remember A stands for attendees. So the $2.25 is how much it costs for the attendees to come. So if we multiply the $2.25 by however many attendees are at the fair, we're going to know how much money we got from those attendees coming. So we need to add that to the total cost, or not the total cost, but the total amount we get from the students coming. And we want it to be either equal to 350 so we can cover the cost of the tent, or we want it to be more than that so we can both pay off the tent as well as have more money left over. So the correct answer for this one is going to be B. Take a look at the next question. An internet business sells US flags for $16.95 each, plus $2.50 shipping per flag. Shipping is free, however, on orders where more than $100 of flags are purchased. We want to know which one of these statements, either the equation or the inequalities, shows the number of flags represented by F that must be purchased to get free shipping. Now, the key to this is that we have $16.95, right? That's per flag. So we have to pay $16.95 per flag. Okay. The other cost we have to do is $2.50 for shipping per flag as well. So if you buy 5 flags, however, $16.95 times 5, and then also $5 times the $2.50 for shipping, that would be our total if we add it all together. Okay, so that's for shipping. However, we're concerned with the one that shows how many flags we can get in order to get free shipping. So if we're only focused on getting free shipping, what we don't want to do is add $16.95 and $2.50. Now, you might want to, but the reason why you're not going to add it is because we're not going to have to pay that $2.50 for each flag we have, as long as the amount of flags we've purchased is above $100. So we don't want to add it, which means we're not going to have C, because C is when you take the shipping and you take the cost and add it together. Okay. A isn't going to be our correct answer because we're not trying to find how many flags we need to get exactly $100. Because if you look, it says we need more than $100 for shipping to be free. So we need more than 100, not exactly 100. So it can't be A either. Also, if you take a look at D, D says 16.95 times F plus $2.50 is greater than 100. For the same reasons we can't choose C, it's going to be the same reason we can't choose D. Remember, that $2.50 would have to be multiplied by F, which stands for our flags anyway, because you're being charged shipping per flag, not a flat rate. This represents a flat rate of shipping, meaning it doesn't matter how many flags you purchase, you're only going to pay $2.50 for shipping once. And that's not the case based on the information we're given. So from there, we can eliminate this here. So this question is all about making sure you understand what the parts of your, what the information you have in the problem mean, right? So the final answer, the only answer it can be now is B, because $16.95 times F is greater than 100. That 100 stands for the $100 worth of flags that we have, right? And we said however many flags we get, whatever the total cost for that is, it's going to be free if that total cost is more than $100. So we're just focused on the cost of the flags, because if we're going to get free shipping, then we're only paying for the cost of the flags. That's why we don't want to include the shipping here. We take a look at this problem here. So for this problem, we're solving for X, right? Anytime you see parentheses, it automatically lets you know we're going to be using the distributive property. Parentheses with something directly outside of it, like this 4, is going to be multiplied into the X and the 5. Remember, distribution is a process of multiplication. So 3 times X, 3 times -2, and this is a -2 times X and -2 times 2. Remember, if there's a minus sign, whatever comes directly after it, that means that term is actually negative. So that's going to give us 4x plus 5, or excuse me, not plus 5. That's going to be 4x plus 20 equals 3x minus 6. -2 times x is -2x. And -2 times 2 is going to be -4. So that's what we have so far. Now I want to combine like terms. You notice the 3x and the -2x are similar terms, and then -6 and -4 are similar terms. If you need to, a good idea to do is to rewrite it so that you have your like terms next to each other. Remember, the whole goal is to solve for that variable, but there's multiple steps we need to do before we can get to that point to figure out what x is equal to. So I'm going to rewrite all this. Now I'm going to combine like terms. Remember, you are only ever combining like terms when the terms are on the same side of the equal sign. Right now, I only have like terms on the right-hand side of my equal sign. Left-hand side, I don't have it. So now I'm going to 3x minus 2x is going to give me just x. -6 minus 4. Make sure you know how to add and multiply, divide, and subtract integers. -6 minus 4 is going to be -10 equals 4x plus 20. Now I need to decide which side I want my variable on, because I have them on both sides of the equal sign, and that's not okay. So I'm going to decide to put them on the left-hand side, which means I need to get rid of this one on the right so that I can move it to the left. So everything you do both sides. So 4x minus an x is going to be 3x plus 20 equals -10. Next thing I need to do is I need to get this variable term by itself. So in order to do that, I need to get rid of that 20 that's there. So subtract 20 from both sides. I'm left with 3x equals negative 10 minus 20 is negative 30. Final step is to divide both sides by 3. So x is equal to negative 10. So our answer for this is D. Now, what I also want to show you is that it's possible to, that's not what I wanted to do. Hold on. Get this back. It's possible to solve this without actually solving for the variable, right? Remember, the purpose of us solving this equation is so that we can figure out what is x equal to. But they're giving you a whole bunch of possibilities that x can be. So since they're giving that to you, what that means is, give me a second. There we go. Oh, that's weird. What that means is we can plug in these x values into the equation and see if it's true. So for example, if I chose to start with that negative 1, and let me see something real quick. There we go. If I chose to start with that negative 1, I'm going to take that negative 1 and I'm going to plug it in anywhere I see an x, because we're trying to say that x is equal to negative 1, and we're going to see if it's true. So 4 times negative 1 plus 5 equals 3 times negative 1 minus 2 times negative 1 plus 2. So now my goal is to solve both sides, simplify both sides, and see if I get the same thing equal to each other. If I do, then negative 1 is an answer. If I don't, then negative 1 is not an answer. And you would do the same process. Obviously, we know it's D, but I just wanted you to see it. So negative 1 plus 5 is going to give us 4. So 4 times 4 over here. 3 times quantity negative 1 minus 2. So negative 1 minus 2 is going to be negative 3. And we're going to multiply 3 by that. Minus 2 inside here, negative 1 plus 2 is going to just be 1. So now remember, order of operations, PEMDAS, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, whichever comes first, and then addition and subtraction, whichever comes first. So I need to multiply everything before I can do the subtraction right here. So 4 times 4 is 16, which is equal to 3 times negative 3 is going to be negative 9. And then negative 2 times 1 is going to be negative 2. Now 16 is equal to negative 9 minus 2 is going to be negative 11. But that is not true, as we know, because the answer is D. So that's how I know I can move on to negative 4. I can move on to negative 6. Okay, and then down to negative 10. So you have 2 options. You can either solve the equation like we know how to, like we've been doing, making sure we get the variable on one side and then making sure we get the variable to be by itself to figure out what it's equal to. Or you can go one by one. Let's say you forgot how to do this. You can go one by one and plug in what the x values are and see if it's true. If both sides of the equation are true, then you know it's a solution. This one is not true, right? They're not equal. So that means that's negative 1 is not a solution. It's not our answer. Next problem. If you notice, we have fractions here, right? Based on what we just did the last time, what we could do, we could just plug in these values for x and see if both sides are equal to each other. But if you notice, the fractions both have the same denominator. Remember, you can't add or subtract fractions unless you have the same denominator. And because they do, we could keep this, right? We don't have to get rid of the denominator right away. If you're not comfortable with that, all you have to do is multiply by what you see in the denominator to both sides. Okay, so if I rewrite this, I have 5/4 x minus 6. You have to multiply 4 by both sides. Now remember, it's the sides. It's not just where the fraction is, right? Because you're doing the same thing to both sides. What I'm going to do instead, I'm going to just subtract, keep my fractions because they have the same denominator. So it's not like I have to do any extra steps to be able to add or subtract. So I want to get all my variables on the left-hand side, which means I'm going to subtract 5/4 x here and 5/4 x here. That cancels out. So now 3/4 x minus 5/4 x, right? It's the same thing as if they were whole numbers or integers. All we need to do is just subtract them. So 3 minus 5 is -2. So -2/4 x plus 2 equals -6. So now I need to subtract 2 from both sides because I need to get that variable term by itself. So that's going to be -2/4 x equals -6 minus 2 is going to be -8. Now, if you notice, -2/4, I can reduce that. I can divide both top and bottom by 2, and that's going to give me 1/2. So I'm going to put -1/2 x is equal to -8. Now, my final step, remember, the coefficient, technically, even though we don't put it there, the coefficient of the x of all our variables when we solve is a +1. We have a negative right here, and we still have this fraction. So I'm going to take care of both of them in this next step. I'm going to multiply both sides by a -2 so that I can get my variable by itself. So when I do that, that cancels out here. The negative and the 2 cancel out. So I'm just left with x equals a negative times a negative is a positive. So 8 times 2 is 16. So the answer to this one is going to be B.